Hello, everyone, and welcome to this bonus installment of Reds Unrestricted. Today, we're going to be previewing the FA Cup final, Liverpool's first for 10 years, as they try to win it for the first time since 2006 and the 8th time overall. So, we're looking to break quite a lengthy duck here, and we're going up against the same side that we beat at Wembley in February in the form of Chelsea. So, they'll obviously be going for revenge, and Liverpool will be going for that pretty rare achievement. Of winning both competitions in the same year. But we'll start with a general look at the fixture, and I'm joined to do that as usual by Dan Clubb and Chloe Bloxham. Chloe, let's think about the magnitude of the FA Cup final as a game. Do you think that we've maybe lost sight of it, not just as a Liverpool fan base, but maybe the fan bases of some top teams generally, because this certainly used to be the biggest game in English football, and there's no denying that it is still a massive game, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is, because it's the opportunity to win another major title, in the sense of, you look at the most decorated club in English history, and it will be Liverpool, closely followed by Manchester United, even though they like to believe they're first. But it gets you another one of those trophies that you can put up on the wall and say that you've won another major honour. And it's another trophy. It's a chance to basically just go above everyone else once again. And I'm one of those people where generationally, maybe I don't appreciate, is probably the word, the FA Cup, or at least I don't appreciate it as much as people of older generations tell me about the magic of the cup. To me, the FA Cup, the League Cup, it's always been this thing of, oh, that's an additional bonus, but it's not the one I want first. And that's because you've got the Champions League there, and also the Premier League. And the FA Cup, depending on when the fixtures actually land, they can either be kind of a bit annoying, in the sense of you've got massive games all around it in the moment, and then you've got another first rounder where you don't want to disrespect the cup, but then you've also got to make changes, and you want to give opportunities to different players. And we've not been good enough in recent years in the FA Cup, so it's nice to actually have a cup run. It's nice to get to Wembley several times. It's expensive as hell. I mean, I think a ticket was like 115 quid alone. They've increased the prices from the League Cup final when we played Chelsea, but it is still an absolute major deal, especially because pretty much 9 times out of 10, it's always going to be another big Premier League club in that side of the draw who's going to reach the final. But I can really appreciate that maybe I overlook it, maybe the clubs of the big six at least overlook it. Because when you look at the likes of Everton, Crystal Palace, Wolves, Leicester, to them this is absolutely massive. Never mind if you actually looked at clubs in the Championship or anyone else who challenges, and that small pot of prize money, which everyone looks at and thinks, my God, to them, that's actually a massive, massive deal.
And I think, you bang on there. Well, a lot of the time when I actually watch the FA Cup finals, Liverpool haven't been in the game really for, as we said at the start, like 10 years. When you watch it, you do get a sense of magnitude, I think, especially because, like you say, Chloe, a lot of the time it is kind of two of the big six going up against each other for all the talk about maybe those sides disrespecting the competition. That either shows that maybe they're not, or they've just got much stronger squads than everybody else. I think with Liverpool this year, you have seen kind of draws in the competition. We played Shrewsbury, for example, quite early on. We played Norwich as well. So that was, again, more reasonable than we've had in past years. And we had obviously the semi-final against Man City, which was really certainly the first half of a classic Liverpool performance, I think. And I think that game certainly felt pretty special, and I hope that carries over into this one. But just to follow up, Chloe, before I bring you in, Dan, One point I've seen raised is that scheduling the final during the season, because obviously there's still 2 more Premier League games for Liverpool after this, one in midweek and one next weekend. Do you think that putting it here rather than maybe a week after the end of the Premier League season seems to like diminish the importance of it a little bit? And would you prefer if it was kind of out on its own?
It depends, because if I'm not, like, we're in a title race still, so obviously it kind of seems like, well, the advantage is now with Manchester City because they play first, so there's not as much pressure on them. But in another sense, it's a case of the likes of Manchester United have won the league around 7 times previously, with less points or the same amount of points that Liverpool have got right now. So it's a good distraction as well, because you know that, like the players said, they can't waste the energy thinking about Manchester City. They let the fans do that. And every time hope kills you, even for 5 minutes that a team can hold on, hope can kill you. So I think it can be seen as 2 different things. It can be seen as massive, depending on how your league's going. And also it can seem as a good distraction or a negative distraction. In this moment, it's a bit of both for me, because I don't know how we're going to claw the league back, in the sense of it's down to Manchester City. So I wouldn't mind doing their heading by winning another trophy right now. But at the same time, it does annoy me that they get to play first, and then we have a week where we have to fit 2 games in. And also the Champions League, at least, you know, I don't know where that would fit in if the FA Cup had got moved to a week before, a week after, because we play the 22nd against Wolves and then the 28th against Real Madrid.
Yeah, that is a factor. And I think in previous years, it has been after the season, but maybe the scheduling this year has been more difficult. Things maybe been a little bit, delayed for whatever reason. Because obviously of maybe the knock-on effects of COVID. But I personally would like to see it maybe have its own slot. I think it is a little bit kind of clumsily inserted into the calendar at the moment. But I think the general point here is the FA Cup on its own is, the FA Cup final on its own is a pretty monumental fixture, and I think a kick-off at the weekend will really be the time that mostly sets in, or when you're in the ground. I'm sure that kind of and around the stadium, that build-up will leave you in no doubt about how big a day it is. But really, the bottom line is we do look at it as an addition to the 2 big competitions. So in terms of like Liverpool's season, if it was just the 2 cup competitions, for example, we'd probably be disappointed with that. Whereas if we won the Champions League and the 2 cups, then all of a sudden it becomes like a historic season for us. But Dan, to bring you in, I mentioned at the top about it being a long time since Liverpool won the competition. Seeing as you are the oldest member of the panel, I was thinking about maybe getting your reflections of that 2006 game. Obviously, most famous for Steven Gerrard's goal, but like a lot has changed since then, hasn't it? And it really puts into perspective that Liverpool haven't done brilliantly in this competition for a club of their stature. Chloe says, was the most successful team in English football.
Yeah, I'm glad my age is coming to the fore at this juncture. But yeah, no, that final, we were essentially dead and buried in it, quite frankly. Like, time wasn't on our side. The game hadn't particularly gone our way. And then, of course, it had to be Steven Gerrard. I think I seen Jamie Carragher talking about that game just the other day, actually, sort of in build up to this, and he essentially, I think I'm right in saying, a West Ham player went down. This is going slightly off topic. A West Ham player went down, and they kicked the ball out to like get treatment to their player, and we should have thrown it back to them. But there was so little time remaining in the game, we decided not to. We played on, and obviously the ball breaks to Gerrard, and the rest is history. And Carragher actually pinpointed himself sort of in a centre forward position. But yeah, it's an incredible strike to obviously win the game, and it's now known as the Gerrard final. And we've had a couple of players steal the show in FA Cup finals down the years, obviously. and finals more generally, of course. But Michael Owen against Arsenal is another one that springs to mind. But in terms of us since then, really, in the FA Cup final, the FA Cup rather, it's an interesting one because for a long time, obviously, with our struggles trying to win the Premier League, we've been sort of dubbed this cup side, particularly under Gerard Houllier, obviously. But we have actually struggled, particularly in recent years, obviously, in the FA Cup and in the League Cup, because I think we've all kind of alluded to it. The squad depth simply hasn't been there for Jurgen Klopp to challenge. Like, his sort of modus operandi when he came into the club was to win the Premier League. And obviously, we all know the love affair he has with the Champions League. So he's always going to prioritise those two competitions. And it's not really been until this year that he's had anything like the squad to compete, I think, on all four fronts, which is obviously what we've ended up doing. But I do think, like you referenced earlier, the draws have been so much kinder. Like, I've been to Wolves away in the FA Cup third round in the last few years, and you just think these are a decent Premier League side. Jurgen Klopp is going to rotate. I think Kejan Hoover plays 80-odd minutes of one of them games. He was like 16 at the time. So we've had a little bit of misfortune, really, in truth, in the domestic cups. But this year, like I say, it has kind of fell our way. The trickiest tie we've had up until the semi-final was probably Norwich, and even that was at home. And they're relegated now, so they are what they are. But yeah, I think I'm made up the fact we're in the FA Cup final, and I think this is almost like Jurgen Klopp often gets a little bit of criticism compared to Guardiola for his like treatment of domestic cups, and obviously if we win on Saturday, he's completed the set then. So I think this is a huge deal for the football club and a huge deal for Klopp, and even rival fan bases if people take notice of that sort of thing. And just to say on sort of the magnitude of the competition as well, it's definitely lost a little bit. It's a bit of its importance, I'd probably say, by being placed in the middle of the season. You said there, like, it used to be at the end, and it always has been. And I think the fact it's now been moved seamlessly into whilst the season's still going on, kind of just says where the competition's at. Like, it's lost importance, like, pretty much every year, certainly to the Big Six. And I think, like I say, the fact that it's just been moved and allowed to be moved into the middle of the season would suggest that it's losing even more of its gravitas.
Yeah, and not only that, not only the final as well. You see the fifth round, for example, I think now takes on a midweek slot. You see replays getting phased out, and whilst I do think those are sensible decisions, it does maybe reflect that, at least in the traditional sense, the FA Cup isn't getting the value that it once had. But Chloe, was there something you wanted to add on that before we move on to sort of Chelsea in particular?
I was just going to say that I think once again we go back to the idea that I think you're only in like $1 million or something for actually winning the thing. And from a business perspective, which sadly football is no longer just for fun, it is a business. It's not seem massive, you win the Premier League in 100 to 200 million for just winning that outright. Even if you get promoted from the Championship, you get, I think, more than what you get for winning the Premier League. If you stay up in the Premier League, it's more than what you earn for getting the FA Cup. You win the Champions League, that's near 200 million. So when you actually put the competitions together, this competition from the perspective of, okay, well, we need to buy a player next season, we need to do this next season, it doesn't seem feasible for like owners and also managers, because why would you focus all your time, if you're a good enough squad, on this which you can earn $1 million in, when instead you can focus on the Champions League or the Premier League, and you're in the middle of the season and games are coming thick and fast and you've got a game every 2 to 3 days. People are obviously going to rotate in this competition because there's less money on the line for you to then recycle into the club next season.
You actually make a really good point there, to be fair. Like, we probably do underestimate the extent to which football is sort of determined by business interests, and the incentive isn't really there. Maybe we know that I think you probably get more money for winning the Champions League group game than you do for winning the final, for example. So that actually will probably be a calculation that's being made. But obviously for Liverpool, the magnitude of the game is heightened by the fact that they are up against a side of the quality of Chelsea, and who they had some sort of historical battles against, really, not least in the final in February. But Chelsea coming into the game are in pretty questionable form. Obviously, they won against Leeds, but we've seen some really difficult days for them recently. Obviously, the collapse against Wolves at the weekend. They've lost to Everton, lost heavily to Brentford, went out of the Champions League, and there's probably one or two that I'm missing off there as well. Dan, do you think that's going to be relevant coming into this game? Do you think that form would maybe go out the window for the final or a game of this magnitude? I mean, is it something that gives you a bit of extra hope, maybe, coming into the games compared to, for example, how you felt in February?
Oh yeah, 100% in terms of the hope, because although we know what Chelsea are all about, we know what they're capable of on their day, and they've shown it, twice already this season against us, of course, and they've definitely shown it in finals since Thomas Tuchel arrived. Obviously, we've seen them, beat Man City last year in the Champions League, and they pushed us right to the edge. I think 11-10 on penalties. It doesn't get much more finely balanced than that, really. But in terms of their form, yeah, if I was a Chelsea fan, I'd be concerned about what's been going on over the last few weeks. I mean, they've sort of rubber stamped their place in the top 4 with that win over Leeds. But prior to that, I think even a few of them were sort of looking over their shoulders thinking, we need to start picking up some results here, because they'd essentially stopped playing a few weeks ago. To coin an old sort of football analogy of being on the beach, seemed to apply for Chelsea, but it was different. It was more a case of like what's going on off the field of that club seems to be having an effect and playing an impact on what was happening on the field, because Tuchel was referencing it himself in quite a lot of press conferences, and I think he was almost giving the players a way out for the way they were playing. And it's very difficult. Like, obviously, we've been going pretty much full tilt now since sort of the turn of the year, and it served us well, obviously, reaching essentially the end of every single competition. And the Premier League, who knows where that'll go over the next couple of games, but we're there or thereabouts, literally in all 4. And that serves us well. Like I say, I think that's probably the most positive thing this squad can have. Slight rotation here and there and just going at every single game. Whereas Chelsea are essentially asking themselves now to be pretty much off the pace for a number of weeks and then come full tilt into a final against us. That's a really difficult thing to do, in my opinion. I'm certain they'll be well organised. I'm certain they'll be, relatively difficult to break down for large periods. But I think over the course of 90 minutes, the fact that we have got so much high intensity football in us and we have been playing at such a high level for so long as well, I think stands us in brilliant stead ahead of this one.
Yeah, Chelsea found themselves in sort of no man's land for the period where they were, increasingly far behind Liverpool and Man City, but they also had a cushion to the teams behind them. That then kind of disappeared to the extent that they probably did have to win. If they hadn't been able to beat Leeds, who did sort of implode a little bit on Wednesday, then who knows? They might have, might have gone down to the last day, which would have been almost snatching Europa League from the jaws of the Champions League, really, for Chelsea, who've been kind of in that position for so long. It'd be interesting to see the extent to which revenge plays a part in building them up for the game. If they do need to kind of get into a different competitive mindset, I think that will be a factor, because obviously the manner, like you alluded to there, Dan, of losing that final will have hurt them, I think, a lot. And also not only Liverpool, like I think they've lost the last 2 FA Cup finals against Arsenal and Leicester. I mean, they'll be absolutely desperate to avoid making that 3 in a row. I think only one team has actually done that, or it certainly hasn't happened since the 90s. But Chloe, to come to you, I think there's an interesting counter question to be asked here about what kind of form of Liverpool actually in. If this was a Chelsea podcast and you were being asked that question, because we talk so much about what each game means for the title race. Your 3-word review, I think the other day, was grinding through games. For us, it's become all about results at this stage of the season, and for quite a while, really. But if you had to say what you think in terms of how Liverpool are actually playing at the moment, how well they are, and how close they are to their top level, because they're going to need to be pretty near to that at the weekend to beat this team.
Yeah, I think the games against Villarreal, Aston Villa, even Tottenham, it'll give Chelsea something to get really excited about, because we got exploited in all 3 games, especially defensively. And you're dealing with the fact that on the day Liverpool can be brilliant. If they're in that mood, then they can be untouchable. But it's a final. People can play occasions. It's never supposed to be easy, and it will not be against Chelsea. We've played them how many times? 3 this season, and every single occasion has been really hot, stressful, to be honest. You've got that moment where we're 2-0 up. We seem like we're playing absolutely brilliant, and then defensively we collapse within the space of 5 minutes against them. So, I think Chelsea will probably sit here and say, okay, the problem is Liverpool. If they show up, they can, be unbelievable, but there are weaknesses there that people have exploited, and we can get on that. And on top of that, you've got the added bonus of, oh, well, they don't have Fabinho, who's integral into the system. And Jordan Henderson can do a job, yeah, sure, but it's not our preferred midfield 3. Then again, we didn't have that preferred midfield 3 in the win against them in the League Cup, because Thiago ended up being replaced within the warm-up. So I think Chelsea, when they look at it, I think they'll be right up for it, to be honest. I think they'll think to themselves, we can easily exploit them here, because I remember the final, and I hated it. It seemed like they were constantly in. I think Mason Mount should have had one, Pulisic should have had one. Those 2 missed sitters, and then they also scored about 4 offside goals or something stupid over the 120 minutes. So I think, from a Chelsea perspective, you've got to stay positive and also see that other teams have caused Liverpool a lot of problems. They're not at their best form. It seemed like in the last couple of weeks we've slightly ran out of steam a bit in games, whether that's straight from the off and whether that's mentally or physically. It's bound to happen with the fact that in any other season or generation you've probably won the league by now, but you're up against the City side. So I think Chelsea will be they'll obviously be underdogs, but I think they'll actually be smiling underdogs, because I think they believe they can get at us.
And in a way, the Fabinho injury that you mentioned could be an indication of things catching up with Liverpool, just in terms of the competitive demands that have been placed on them. I think the point you make about Thiago, by the way, is a great one, because it seems to be something people actually neglecting. People worrying about Fabinho being out of this game, and yeah, we know he is probably one of the bigger misses in terms of individual players you could take out the squad. But Thiago has been crucial for Liverpool this season. You look at the record with and without. I think a lot of the games where he dropped points has been when he's been unable to play. We managed to beat them ish. Obviously on penalties it's a bit of a grey area, so whether you've actually won the game. But yeah, we managed to, I think, slightly by the tiniest amount edge that game, even without him. So having him in the side will certainly be a blessing. But I'll just stay with you, Chloe, because this was something I was going to ask later, but you kind of touched on it there, so we may as well come to it now. Like, comparing the game in February to what we might see on Saturday, I mean, it sounds like you're expecting something pretty similar in terms of the approach of both teams, but is there anything? I mean, it was obviously a couple of months ago now, so you might not be able to remember absolutely everything, but is there anything you think Liverpool can take from that game? I mean, what would you want to maybe see them do differently? You mentioned there about Chelsea's ability to exploit the high line, for example.
Yeah, I think Liverpool just need to gain more control. In it, like Jurgen Klopp said after the game, it was like a boxing match. I mean, it was back and forth. There was a time, I think, where Matip scores where we are on top, and it feels like we're suffocating them for maybe 15, 20 minutes, and we don't take advantage of it. We can't put the ball in the back of the net. It seems like everything's bouncing everywhere. And I think from a Liverpool perspective, we just need to, I don't want to say take the sting out the game, but take the sting out the game. Act as if it's not a final. Don't let the atmosphere get to you. If you've got the ball, those Chelsea fans will be absolutely appalling. They'll be quiet. So we just need to recycle the ball better, keep hold of it. We know Liverpool can create a decent atmosphere. We saw it with the semi-finals. So let the fans do all the believing, let the fans get overexcited, all of that. As for the Reds, I just need them to play how they play football, because at times against Chelsea it seemed very much like we weren't doing that, and I can understand because we were in a situation where we weren't playing. It seemed like everyone was, even Chelsea fans were absolutely petrified we'd win 3-0, and it wasn't that easy on the day, where I think now Chelsea fans will probably think to themselves, they could win 3-0 on the day, but they're not in the greatest of form and people have exploited them, and we've got enough pace in our front line to do damage. Lukaku bullied us at times, if I'm being honest, in that final as well. So I'm expecting more of the same, but I'd like it to be more, I don't know, more reserved from the Reds. I don't care if we have to play boring football, if we have to do things that isn't as entertaining as what it would be for the neutral for us to go back and forth. I just want to get the win. So by all means, keep that ball, recycle it, break them down, and get the goals.
I think more reserved is bang on, because what do you want to do as the top side? You almost want to make a game, especially a big game. You want to play it on your terms. You don't want to make it exciting. You want to make everything like predictable. And I don't think we saw that really. In the opposite fixture, I think it was billed at the time as one of the all-time great 0-0s, because there were big spells of that game which were sort of end-to-end. Chelsea had a lot of big chances, really, that they didn't take. So yeah, I mean, if we can do that, that'll be the marker of just how good we are. I think if we can exert control, and we won't be able to do it for the full game. We've seen that even though we are better than Chelsea this season, the league table's evidence of that, quite comprehensively. We've not managed to beat them in 90 minutes, and a lot of the time we are kind of having spells in the game where Chelsea kind of wrest control from us. So if we can hold on to it as much as possible, which is going to be a big ask, then that will go a long way towards winning. But Dan, you can talk as well about what kind of game you're expecting, but I wanted to get your thoughts on a couple of pieces of sort of team news on the Chelsea side before we finish by looking at Liverpool. So there's two really. There's the midfield. So Kovacic and Konate are both doubts for the game. So what do you think of that? And the other thing would be, we've seen Lukaku score, I think, 3 in his last 2 now. So there's a good possibility that he'll start the game. Would you prefer to face him or face Kai Havertz, who is more of kind of a false nine presence and is maybe someone who can cause you problems with kind of his movement and maybe his almost more of a facilitator role than Lukaku, who is more of a out and out striker?
Yeah, I'll start with the striker role really, and Lukaku Havertz. My initial thought was, as you're asking the question, was please start Lukaku. To be honest, although he obviously has hit a little bit of form, and there's absolutely no denying his quality. Like, he is on his day. He spent 18 months, 2 years, whatever it was, absolutely banging goals in for Inter Milan. So he's a high quality operator. But his form since coming back to England hasn't been of that. And I actually think the way he plays is more suited to us. Yeah, he's got pace and he can run in behind. But if you're going to go up against Virgil van Dijk, I'll quite happily take that battle. And even Konate, to sort of give you a hint as to what my team might be. I'd be quite happy with that. Though either of them battles, quite frankly. Whereas, as you say, someone like Havertz, his movement, his craft, if you like, and the way he can sort of manipulate defenders around, I think has been really impressive actually this year. And he's kind of stepped up to the plate, whilst Lukaku's had his issues. So for me, if you give me a choice, I'd definitely rather see Lukaku play against us and hope he doesn't come back to bite me, because like I say, he certainly does know where the back of the net is. And in terms of the midfield issues they've got, I don't know what you guys feel, but I'd imagine myself, both of you, and many Liverpool fans would have probably Kante and Kovacic would have been two of the first people we'd have picked if you'd have said two Chelsea players can't play on the weekend, because those two have just got this nasty habit of being outstanding against us. Kante in sort of years gone by, not so much this season, because I think his injury problems have kind of caught up with him maybe a little bit now. But Kovacic, every time he seems to play, we always say it, don't we, as Liverpool fans, particularly about goalkeepers, but he seems to reserve his best performances when he's playing against us. He was brilliant in the game at Stamford Bridge earlier this year. I'm pretty sure he got man of the match, and he definitely scored a worldly volley to make it 2-2. So yeah, I'm delighted that those two are probably going to be missing. It leaves the likes of Jorginho, Ruben Loftus-Cheek, perhaps Mason Mount to play a little bit deeper, and leaves them sort of names to play in midfield. And although Jorginho is very good on the ball, he doesn't really have the athleticism to get around particularly well. So I think that's an area we could exploit. Ruben Loftus-Cheek, potentially makes up for that in terms of athleticism, but there's a reason he doesn't play a lot of football, I would suggest, for Chelsea. So yeah, I think the team news from their perspective is good for us. Especially in light of obviously Fabinho's problem. And just to touch on the game before we move on to us, I do agree with what Chloe said, and sort of Chelsea have definitely caused us problems this year. There's absolutely no doubt about it, and all the games have been tense, stressful and close affairs. But there's something in me that is really confident about the way this is going to go on the weekend. I think their form, compared to what's gone on in recent weeks with us. And also, I just think the Premier League's not dead. We're fully aware of that. We know that. But at the same time, there might be a slight shift in mentality from the playing perspective, as if to say the Premier League's potentially out of reach now. It's certainly looking that way. We need to make sure we mop up these two cup competitions, and obviously one being the elite one in the last few weeks, to make this a truly memorable season, because to put it quite simply, they've worked too hard to not pick up at least two more trophies from this year. So I can see us potentially putting in some sort of performance reminiscent of that first half against City at Wembley a few weeks ago, and overrunning Chelsea, because they, like I say, they've been off the boil for a while. We haven't. We've been, there or thereabouts for a long time now. So I think we can put together a serious performance and potentially kill the tie.
Well, that would be incredible if we could do that. So often we see finals played as sort of almost scrappy affairs and cagey. But if Liverpool could really show that quality on the day, then I think it could be a really enjoyable occasion for us. The opposite, like I say, of what we saw in February. But equally, it could. I think there's the potential there for it to be a repeat. I mean, in terms of the two pieces of the team, just to finish on that, I think Kovacic is someone, and Kante to a degree as well, who's almost ideally suited to face Liverpool in a sense, and we see that so often in terms of his ability to dribble through like the press in the midfield and then drive at your defence. And those are situations where Liverpool can be, particularly exposed given how aggressively they set up. And obviously with Lukaku and Havertz, Lukaku has found form. And we know that on his day, he almost verges on too hot to handle, really. But I almost agree with you, Dan, in the sense that I know really what I'm going to get from Lukaku more so than Van Dijk, and I'd back our centre backs to edge the battle, not dominate the battle, because I don't think you're going to do that against Lukaku, but edge it over 90 minutes. Whereas with Havertz, I think there are more kind of unfamiliar issues being posed there. But let's talk about the Liverpool side, just to finish off. Obviously, there's a couple of question marks, really. What I'd say is set, personally, is Alisson in goal, Trent at right back, Van Dijk as one of the centre-backs, Robertson. Midfield will probably be Henderson, Thiago and Keita. Keita, thankfully, is fit despite having that issue late on against Villa. There's maybe a little bit of debate over what the front line will be, but less so, I think, than the centre-back position. So, Chloe, I'll come to you first. How are you going to fill those gaps in the side, and why do you think that's the best way for Jurgen Klopp to go?
I guess it depends what he thinks their team will line up with. I'm just letting you know the bad news that Kante is fit, by the way, I think. I've read many articles saying Kante is back for this game. Kovacic is a doubt, but still, they've got a slight glimmer of hope that he might. Kante was in training and he can start. So there's that. As for my centre-back, I'd probably go with Konate because I'm assuming Lukaku's going to have a point. He's going to have a go at some point. Konate's got the extra pace as well. For if, Pulisic or whoever gets past the full back. But once again, me seeing Matip in there wouldn't be bad either. I'd quite enjoy that. The midfield three, I'd leave, like you said, my strikers, obvious. It's got to be Diaz, Mane and Salah. It just has to be. Jota in recent weeks has gone off the boil. I think he could be a good super sub. Diaz most definitely has to start, and I think him getting subbed off the other day is proof that he is a starter. Sadio Mane, how you can leave him out in this form, I've got no idea. Mo Salah's had a rest, and he needs to show up.
He definitely does. And one thing I said earlier in the season is I think that this season deserves, even now that his form has declined a bit, I think it deserves a big moment in one of these games, which is vital for the trophy from Salah. And I think that will go a long way to sort of remedying the loss of form that he's had, whether he could do it now or whether he does it in Paris. And I think either would be fine, both would be ideal. But yeah, you are kind of just waiting for that big performance really from him, even though we have seen him contribute in some ways that aren't goal scoring, but we've also seen some performances which are very unlike him. But Dan, coming to you now, same sort of questions really. I think the centre-back thing is the main selection dilemma. You've already hinted at what you do with that one. But would you have the same front line as Chloe? Because I think I would.
Yeah. Well, I did hint earlier. I'll deal with the centre-backs first because, like I say, I've already made my feelings known on that. I couldn't keep my powder dry. For me, it would be Konate. And I think the matchup against Lukaku is probably the prominent reason as to why. And I do think that will be who Chelsea go with, given current form. And I also think Konate is playing better than Matip when called upon recently. And that's not particularly a slur on Matip. I think he's been outstanding all season. But Konate, as the season's progressed, has just got better and better every time he's played, really. And he has been chosen for these sort of occasions before. Obviously, we've seen him in the semi-final against Man City at Wembley as well. And big Champions League nights seem to be his at the minute, and that may continue into the final later on in the month, of course. That remains to be seen. And as for the attack, the midfield, I agree. I think it picked itself pretty much in light of the news with Fabinho. In attack, yeah, I'd probably side with what Chloe said as well in terms of Diaz, Mane, and Salah. Salah, he hasn't been, in red hot form recent weeks. There's absolutely no denying that. I agree with you in terms of he's probably deserving of a big occasion. I actually think he'll want that to be the Champions League final because obviously it's a bigger stage, and we've all seen what he said about wanting Real Madrid and then subsequently getting Real Madrid. Like, that seems to be, his destiny in his own eyes in terms of beating them, especially in the Champions League final, like I say. So, yeah, I think, listen, I'd be made up if he does it on the weekend, but the way it's going at the minute, you'd almost look at Diaz and Mane to be the two to make things happen. Firmino's obviously back in contention. He was on the bench the other night against Villa, but he certainly doesn't start this game, having not kicked the ball in anger for about 5 or 6 weeks. It must nearly be now. It's been a while. And Jota, it's just to finish on him, like his form just isn't there for this game whatsoever. It is interesting because a couple of months ago, you'd have probably looked at Jota as being a shoo-in for a game like this, just because his goal-scoring form was so electric, but not now. Not only has he fell off the boil in terms of goals just of late, his all-round play has just been miles off it. So it's nice to have those sort of options on the bench, of course, especially someone like Jota, who can get you a goal if you need it pretty much out of nothing. But like I said, that front three and the midfield pretty much picks itself, which is, I suppose, quite handy really for Klopp.
Yeah, it is. Maybe the dilemma. I think there would have been a real dilemma actually in terms of Henderson or Keita in the midfield. Had he been fit, and it would have been quite telling. I think what he went with that. You know, on the attack, it's just interesting, isn't it? We spent the whole season and maybe even a bit of last season talking about Firmino and Jota who start in hypothetical cup finals, and how that we've actually got a genuine cup final. It's actually going to be neither of them. And Mane, and I know there's certainly a fitness maybe playing a part with Firmino, but I think we'd say that Mane kind of looks the best balance in terms of the attributes that he's providing in that centre forward position at this moment in time. So that's pretty much everything we want to cover. There's only one thing that remains, and that's to get some score predictions. Chloe, I know you don't like doing these, but if you can stomach it, what do you think the scoreline is going to be on Saturday?
I'll touch wood when I say this. I'm going to say 2-1 Liverpool, but I genuinely hate predicting things for massive games.
Well, that's understandable, but a fairly reserved prediction there. I'm sure Dan is now going to say 3-0 and blow you out the water a little bit.
How did you know? Now, in keeping with what I alluded to earlier, and this could be me being just ultra positive, which would be no surprise to most people. I do think we get the job done relatively comfortably here. Just based on, like I say, what's gone before and what's going on off the field and what have you, I think we're in a much better place than they are right now. So yeah, I think Liverpool get the job done. I don't really want to say 3-0 after you predicted it, but I'll go 3-1. They can get a consolation.
Chloe, was something you wanted to add?
I remember when we played them in February, you two were absolutely all over it. You thought that we were going to absolutely batter them. The Chelsea fans thought we were going to batter them. And I'm not falling into this again because I genuinely thought I thought it'd be hard, but after listening to everyone, it then started to get me nervous because everyone thought we were going to absolutely batter them. And I thought we might have been a bit too overboard. I think Liverpool can batter them, but for the sake of it being a final, I'm not going to say it.
Yeah, I think I can't fully remember. I'd be surprised if I was bullish before the game, but if I was, then it would feel like inviting a bit of a punishment. I will admit Dan's positivity has unsettled me a little bit this morning, but that is going to wrap us up for this FA Cup final preview episode. Subscribe to the channel for clips each week, and remember to like the video. We'll be back next week after the Southampton midweek game, the penultimate Premier League fixture. So we'll see you then, and hopefully by that point Liverpool will have added the FA Cup to their trophy cabinet.